So cities are evolving. Real estate is a complex commercial kind of ecosystem of its own. So, a site might have an immediate use, but might be part of a phased residential development over 10, 20 years. Actually, how do you create these assets which can activate those sites and then be relocated? And I think we're just getting to much more intelligent conversations with advisors, consultants, local authorities, and developers. And we're seeing much more interest in developers saying, actually, I do want a different type of venue. And actually, I do want a phased development. And I think that's how I'm going to raise my capital against for a long-term development. So we're excited to see more sustainable venues built, less white elephant.
Hello. Welcome to Talking Place, the podcast bringing placemakers and storytellers together to talk about place. I'm your host, Tanisha Raffiuddin. I am the founder of Concept Culture, a creative agency in London, passionate about creating purposeful brands and telling powerful stories. In this episode, we step into the world of demountable and relocatable architecture with Olly Watts and Amy Casterton from ES Global, the team behind 4 national pavilions at the 2025 World Expo in Osaka, Japan, ABBA Voyage, and some of the most iconic Olympic venues of recent years. Olly is a seasoned events industry professional specializing in concert staging and relocatable architecture. As joint CEO of ES Global, he has played a key role in major world events, including delivering modular structures for London 2012, relocatable venues for Tokyo 2020, and key structures for Paris 2024. Amy leads the international business development team and has held senior positions at organizations such as Homes England, the Premier League, and various departments within the UK civil service. We cover a lot of ground in this episode around how modular systems are designed for reuse, reinvention, and even reincarnation, from water polo arenas to expo pavilions engineered to live on as part of a circular economy. It's a fascinating look at how modular systems can fast-track the creation of high-quality, demountable structures to create cultural landmarks that may only exist for a moment, but leave a legacy that lasts far longer. So please do stick around till the end. All right, let's talk place. Olly, Amy, welcome to the Talking Place podcast.
Nice to meet you. Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
And thank you for hosting us. And I'm really excited to dive into the world of temporary, demountable, and relocatable architecture in this episode, and particularly the role it plays in delivering temporary spaces like the World Expo in Osaka, Japan, which I've had the great privilege of visiting and meeting your colleague Tomoko on the ground and visiting the 4 national pavilions that you have delivered, which I'm sure we'll dive into a little bit more. But let's start off with an introduction. Tell us about ES Global, what's special about the business and your roles in the business.
Okay, I'm the joint CEO of the business, also a founder of the business, along with my business partner, Jeff Burke, who's obviously not in this meeting. We function in a space which is really our roots. Started off in the music industry and very much in touring, and that has really driven and fed into all the work we do. So we look at everything that we're doing and how we can do it quickly, and it's always about putting things in and taking things down and moving them on. But I just wanted to say one thing, and sorry for sounding like an arsehole early on in the script, but we really avoid the word temporary because temporary sort of has a derogatory connotation, and so we use the word demountable, which is also used all the time because everything that we do is compliant to a high level of coding and quality and all that sort of stuff. Whereas when people say temporary, they kind of think of something else. But over to Amy.
I think we might come on to some of that. The tension of the word temporary and how you create sustainable events and you reuse kind of modular systems. So I'm Amy, I'm the business development director. So I'm looking at kind of future opportunities for work and partnerships across our global network of ES global businesses. And we've got businesses in Australia, Japan, Saudi Arabia, and the US and London.
Yeah, wonderful. And certainly noted about the use of the word temporary. And I think that's a good place to start as well, because we on this podcast, it's called Talking Place. It's all about place making, place shaping, and a lot of people have opinions about what's the right word. But in this instance, sites like the Expo, they don't exist one day and then one day they do. So you have made a place and you're part of that place-making exercise. And even if they are temporary in nature, they have lasting global and cultural impact. So probably, I would say even I still remember my experience walking through the Dubai Expo, and that was 5 years ago. And I can certainly say the number of places that are temporary in nature have probably had more impact on us, music festivals, cultural venues, as opposed to more permanent structures like our offices or our schools. Yeah. So let's talk about place then. What does place mean to you? And you can go one by one.
I was thinking about this. For me, on a personal level, it's a good place is somewhere I react to. It either draws me in and makes me curious, or maybe it makes my shoulders drop and I feel really relaxed. And colour is really important in places for me, and how you and the Expo pavilions are interesting on this. And a lot of the things we do, how you create a place that sits comfortably in its location and has a reason for being there. So those are all the things I think about when I think about place.
Amazing.
Yeah, I think that. I think what you just actually said, talking about the ephemeral nature, blah blah blah. We are obviously rooted in shows and events and so on. So we're contributing, supporting the delivery of an event. In the role that we play. So place is about the event. It's about the show. If you go to the theatre, you remember, you have a memory of what the show was, but it's not there all the time. It's there some of the time. And I think that's, in this context, that's what it kind of means to me. And so, if you're moving on to, what's the most important aspect of a place for you, is ultimately that it's a good quality event, whatever that means. If it's a music event, it's got a different aspiration than, say, if it was a fashion show, or if it's an expo, or if it's a sporting event. But I suppose from our point of view, it's about being associated and aligned with really good quality events of different types and so on. And that's sort of what we do, support that process. We're not the producers, but we have a significant role that we that we have an input into these things.
Absolutely. And another question I like to ask people on this podcast is, what is your favorite place in the world?
If I had to pick one, it would probably be a bit of Cornwall. I'm from the village I'm from, which is where I was brought up and where my parents still live, in southeast Cornwall. And it's on the edge of Bodmin Moor, and it has it's very lush and green and very hilly. Hills are very important to me. I live on top of a hill in Tooting, but it's a mix between the kind of the fields and the agriculture, but also the bleakness of the moors, and there's lots of slate and granite. And if you go to Cornwall, if you go to the coast, it's all about the slate cliffs kind of jutting out. And I really like that kind of greenness, but also bleakness that you miss a bit in London at times. What about you, Ollie?
Oh, well, I haven't got one favourite place in the world, but I would say that everywhere I go, I've got a sort of favourite place, if you know what I mean. And I think that in terms of the work we do, where we're really, lucky and privileged to travel and work and, experience different places and cultures. And, if you're in our world, you've got to look at that as being a good thing, not a bad thing. Not, oh God, I've got to go with so-and-so. You've got to look, I'm going somewhere.
Yeah.
And so, just as an example, a favourite place in Japan is that I walk to the office every morning, and when working in Japan, and you've got the crazy sort of giant skyscrapers, busy thing. You walk across this little cut through where you've got this quiet little park, where it's unbelievable and stunning in this context of this massively vibrant city, and I could say the same thing about bits of London or bits of, everywhere you basically go, you have those little bits where surprise you, and you think, wow, this is great. So not one single favourite place, but lots of favourite places.
A collection of memories.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you very much for sharing that. So let's dive into the expo. So I had great pleasure visiting the expo in Osaka with your colleague Tomoko. She showed us around and enabled us to access the pavilions because the queues were phenomenal. Obviously, a complex undertaking for national pavilions on one site. I guess I'd want to start with softer questions. So what has it meant for you as a business to be embedded in a global event like the expo? And, when you've been to the site and you see people walking through the structures and enjoying the content, how does it make you feel?
Oh, I mean, it's fantastically proud, to be honest. I mean, that it was without doubt, it was a challenge, all sorts of every day and, over a long period of time. But it was amazing to be involved in something like that, and something, it was I mean, it's not rocket science, but it was a complex delivery. And so, fantastic. Just, ultimately very proud for the business and everyone involved in the business.
Yeah.
For us, it was really important because we delivered 6 of the venues for the Tokyo Olympics. That was a really big piece of work for us as a company. And take our story way back, and this is a really important place for us, East London. Our old yard for our staging business was on the Olympic Park, and we were compulsory purchased off as the site was developed for London 2012. And we did 2 of the big venues for London 2012. So, the Olympics is in our DNA. And then we were so excited to do all of that work on Tokyo. And then, of course, there was a pandemic, and you've got these amazing venues we built for the Olympics in Japan, and built up a really great Japan supply chain and worked with people like Tomoko and built our team. We then didn't have spectators in those venues. So when the expo was coming to Japan, we worked really hard to respond to those opportunities and to think about how we could bring that supply chain with us, but also deliver some really stunning pavilions on the expo site. So we put a lot of work in that period between the Tokyo Olympics and Osaka to build relationships, to keep our supply chain going, to think about how you could build those venues really well for international teams. But in Osaka, when what we knew would be a fast track build and construction. So everything Olly says about it just being absolutely fantastic to do an expo at that level, it was also felt like the ongoing narrative for us as a company from all the work we did in the Tokyo Olympics.
Yeah. I'm interested in the point you mentioned about, that you designed these venues and the Tokyo Olympic that took place in 2020, just post-pandemic, and there were no spectators.
Well, 2021.
Yeah, 2021, yeah, but they still called it 2020.
That's right.
And so all these athletes performing, to the best of their ability and no one watching them to cheer on. So the audience also makes up the space.
Yeah.
Oh, no, most definitely.
Yeah. So we've talked about the complexity of delivery, and this is, you've delivered sites like Olympics and expos, so it's in your DNA, as you've already mentioned. But for our listeners, what are the key ingredients necessary to deliver projects of this scale?
I mean, fundamentally, it's about, ultimately, it's about getting it done. I mean, they all have their different complexities. And I always think that with any project, the first bit of the project that you have to actually understand is what actually is the project. And that might sound like a pretty obvious and stupid thing, but you often go into projects not really knowing exactly what is driving it. Just as an example, we're doing 4 pavilions side by side. Each one of them had dramatically different approaches from client teams, size of teams, complexity, admin processes, etc., and different aspirations, using unpacking that in the first instancing, and then getting the team sorted into terms of organisation to actually be able to address that in a meaningful and efficient manner. And that's always the first bit of a project that is really difficult. And so often you start doing something not really fully understanding where it's going to go, and that can be for all sorts of reasons that may occur. I mean, just an example. I mean, they're pavilions. They're projecting, the country, UK, PLC, USA, whatever. Both of those countries had regime changes, in the middle of the actual design process. And that has, very direct impact on the way clients are behaving, what they're trying to get across in certain bits. Apart from the obvious things, it also, induces, to a degree, below the surface, a certain amount of sort of anxiety and so on as you go into that mode where, when there's an election on, and it's palpable. You notice it. And so on. So anyway,
no, but it's true because these are political. There's a political element to these national pavilions.
We're all trying to do something different. And Olly's absolutely right. It's really important that you understand how that team likes to work on the client side, but also what they're trying to get across, whether it's about doing lots of trade deals, whether it's about promoting the country to Japanese visitors, whether it's about university education. They're all trying to do something different, and they're all wanting to use that space and fit it out and do their exhibition differently, which is brilliant. You don't get the chance to do that on a very non-cookie cutter. Everything's different, and that's really exciting, but also means we need to resource 4 different teams. We can create some economies of scale, but ultimately you've got 4 different client teams on different time zones. Right. So everything from the USA, obviously Japan in every time zone, because we had our local team kind of engaged with their pavilion, to Australia, USA, Canada, UK and Australia. So actually the UK timeline at a certain point time zone wasn't the end of the world, because we had USA at one end and Australia at the other.
Yeah, you're in the bang in the middle of both 8-hour days.
It was a long day for some of our teams.
Oh yeah, no, I bet. And I guess just building up on what you were saying, so these are stages for countries. They're representing their countries, and I cannot imagine how you deal with these multiple stakeholders, everything from probably politicians, design teams, local planning.
Helpful is the momentum, and we are used to this. You've got an opening date, whether it's kind of Beyonce and her opening night, or an Olympic starter gun going off. We're used to opening on time.
Yes.
So that's a great thing. For ours, we like to work to that momentum. So that means you have that momentum, brings its own energy. Challenges, of course.
Yeah.
The client will have to make decisions.
Yes.
Things won't get ordered. And plans won't be finalised.
Yeah, and that is absolutely correct. There's always that end date that is always there and looming. And the journey there on each of the pavilions was very different for each one. Some of them, all over the place. So but all of them got there in the end, and all of them actually got to good results. But it's just a different way of getting there. And in certain ways, they sort of reflect the country that you're actually working with in the way that they got there in the end. And it's that in itself is interesting, and again it's just part from our point of view and as a company, and individually it's fascinating to be involved in that sort of process and see the difference in approaches and so on. No project's ever the same, and that is one of the interesting things about delivering. What the world that we operate in, it's lots of difference. If you want to do the same thing every day, you shouldn't be working with us. That's not what happens.
Yeah,
and I'm sure we'll come over to talk about it. But then we were working with the different architects, which is great, and we're always working with different architects. But one of our most important internal teams was our planning team, led by a guy called Charlie, and making sure that those meetings, those decisions are recorded, and then the programme is continually updated. And that's a really strong discipline that we bring to any project team, because we can't fall out with the architects, we can't fall out with the client. We can have creative dialogue, let's call it that. But ultimately, we've got to make a decision and we've got to move on to the next thing.
Yes.
Because like you say, we have to get local planning permission, we have to get these things approved, and we have to go into fabrication.
Yeah.
No, I would say, sorry, so building on what Amy's saying, I would say we fall out with everyone all the time, but ultimately you actually get there together and you make it all up, and that's just part of the process, and it really is a bit like that at times.
And going back to what you said initially, we have to get the job done.
It's all about,
and the date is immovable, like you've mentioned before. The expo is going to open on this date, whether we like it or not. Unlike in construction, sometimes programs get delayed. There's a bit of more flexibility on more permanent structures, but not here.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because when you talk to financial folk, they always perceive the the hard deadline as being a significant risk. And I would actually always argue the reverse, because what it does, it focuses everyone's mind. You can only mess about, prevaricate for so long. Ultimately, you've got to actually get there, and that does actually ultimately push everyone together. I mean, of course, along the way, you can have all sorts of disagreements and skirmishes on the way, but ultimately, everyone has to get there, and that is the leveler. Really, is the timescale.
So let's dive into each of the pavilions. Let's start with the UK pavilion, our national pavilion. You've already alluded that it's quite a moment of pride to be working on and representing your country as what I call the Expo as the Olympics of architecture, essentially, because every country, well, most of the countries, not every country, puts on a signature pavilion, and it's a representation of where the country is at that point in time. Is there anything you would like to share, particularly on the UK pavilion? Any particular challenge? Maybe a story that you'd like our listeners to know about your journey on the pavilion?
I think one of the things that was great, one of the really positive aspects was the client side team, and indeed everyone around it. I mean, including significant officials from Expo, Japanese side of things, recognised that the approach for the pavilion was genuinely sustainable. The whole thing was based on a product that we developed ourselves, and with the 100% intention and investment of our time and energy and resource into making something that was going to be reused, genuinely reusable, relocatable, and not something that was going to be, literally scrapped, as is what happens to quite a lot of the pavilions. And I think everyone embraced that from really early on and took on board things like, the challenges related to that. I mean, just as an example, when we first got involved in the project, they were talking about how, because the site's actually on reclaimed land and it's sinking, that what the design criteria for foundations was 25-metre piles. We looked at that and said, this is bloody ridiculous, putting in that amount of concrete into the ground. And we came up with a strategy, with our team, with our project management team, our engineers and the architects. We came up with a strategy that actually basically sat it on the ground and almost had no intervention, which meant that we didn't waste lots of effort in terms of money, time, and damage to the environment and so on, and came up with something that is completely reusable. And it's that part of it, I think, that as a company, that we're really proud about. I mean, obviously it looks good, and actually I think the result is great. I mean, actually in the flesh, but underneath it, there's a really, really credible sustainability story that we'd actually put a lot of effort into, and I think we're really proud of that.
Yeah, and we've managed to do this on a lot of our Olympics projects, is how we make sure that we are innovating through delivering those buildings and structures. So the system we've built, the UK pavilion from our global modular system, is now a new modular construction system we can roll out on a design and build basis for all sorts of different types of, it could be exhibition buildings, but also could be for hospital decant facilities or for education. So that's a system that's engineered to work permanent quality, but can be relocated. And that's getting quite a lot of traction back in the UK. But we've been able to build it in Japan and say, look, this is very strong, compliant to permanent building code for the typhoon and seismic regulations there. And actually in the UK, we'd probably have it slightly less engineered. It would have to be quite so engineered, but it can be a long-term or a relocatable solution for the modular market in the UK. And we think that's been brilliant for us. As Olly says, that's our kind of own research and development. And for the pavilion aspects in particular, working with Woo Architects, that's been really, really good. But it's a construction system that we can take from as our own corporate legacy from that and say, actually, how can we apply this building system for new projects as well? So that's a new bit of our product line, which has been really great to do with the UK pavilion. And it works really well for a pavilion.
So in this instance, then, the Expo offered you this opportunity to create this innovation now, which is part of your corporate legacy as you made. So that is also what I find really fascinating, that the role that programs like the Expo play in moving technology or moving things forward a little faster and enables that innovation to happen.
Definitely. The lightweight foundation system is really interesting for construction. in the UK as well, because obviously there is a lot of waste with concrete piling and foundations, and this is what we can minimise with this system as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you can build a several story high building, big clear span building, and not really have any foundations on a reclaimed site with relatively soft ground, then you can pretty much be sure that you could do it probably almost anywhere. So it's it's good, and it's proof of concept. So,
and that the pavilion, the whole structure is fully relocatable, and it's designed it comes apart to fit into sea containers. So big bits of Meccano that fit really effectively and efficiently into sea containers. So you don't have to lift it up and move it as it is. You'll actually take it apart as a kit of parts and put it back up again, which can be put up in a different reconfiguration. So it's real life, big Meccano stuff.
Yeah. And obviously as a visitor, you don't appreciate that. And had you not mentioned, it would not have clocked on to me at all. Like Tomoko did say that we can't have permanent foundations, so I'd understood that bit. But this whole new system, I hadn't appreciated the science and the technology behind it.
And sadly, that's the sort of thing that we're particularly pleased with ourselves about, because you don't realise.
No, but I think that's good, right? It's invisible.
Yeah, no, exactly. It doesn't feel like a relocatable building. It feels like a permanent building.
Yeah.
And in fact, other things, has high fire rating, blah, 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 all the things that you need that differentiate. But it doesn't feel like that. It feels like an absolutely permanent, built high quality, building. And so from our point of view, the fact that you don't think anything else is a big success.
Yeah, no, I'm glad to hear it. All right, let's move across the pond. Let's move to North America. Let's talk about the US pavilion.
I mean, again, talking my view, I mean, I think that, from an architectural perspective, I think that that what was delivered is absolutely fantastic, and the Trahan Architects, who's the lead. I mean, he had a very, very again, each of the teams that we work with, they're teams that either came to us or we put together, and we then collaborated, and he had a very particular view, and he himself is someone who is always. He travels a lot, spends a lot of time in Japan. He's really into Japanese culture, and I genuinely think that he came up with this kind of. It's the American pavilion, but it really has more than a nod to all sorts of Japanese architecture in terms of the minimalism and so on the outside. And I think it was in that way it was a fantastic success. And also in terms of some of the materials that were actually used, whereas the team came up with some quite innovative ideas in terms of how to make it work within a budget, because don't forget, it has all to be delivered within a budget which is set and cast in stone. So I think it was it's a great piece of I think genuinely think it's a great piece of architecture, and using a much overused word, genuinely quite iconic. So it's good.
And the storytelling's really important.
Yes.
That one is and obviously the audio visual experience, and BRC kind of are really experienced in that, and that's a really important element of that. And our job is to create a structure which will immerse you within that. And our structure has to be able to have the rigging capacity and all of the technical capabilities so that those screens pop and the whole experience pops without you really noticing.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
That one, I think you get a lot of sense of that.
Yeah, and again, from our perspective, although it's the most bespoke out of all of them, there's still quite a large amount of our own equipment, our own proprietary equipment. In that, the whole roof is made out of our truss systems, and various other bits of it are using standard components. But you'd have no sense of that if you're looking at it. It looks like a truly bespoke building. So again, from our point of view, that was a good success. It's a different product in the showroom, which is we're again proud of for different reasons.
So as a visitor, obviously, I don't know if you're following much of it, but the US pavilion is one of the most popular ones on site. 90-minute queues as standard, and it's so popular everyone wants to go inside. I think it's the allure of the simulation of the space rocket, and
No, I mean, I think that's the space rocket. Obviously, is the phenomenal crescendo.
Yes.
is a great gag. It's a great theatrical gag with the floor vibrating.
And the smoke.
It's good. It's good.
Yeah.
The theatrical tricks are always the best.
Yeah.
For a reason.
Yeah, amazing. All right, so let's move on to US's North American neighbor. Let's talk about Canada.
Canada, I mean, I think in certain, like, for example, the exhibition part is really interesting, and I think an incredibly creative approach, and in a way very brave, because it's a huge amount of development of technique and software. I thought that it was really interesting idea. It doesn't feel 100% finished, but it doesn't really matter. It just feels like a really interesting. I mean, I think it's described by the designer as a poetic journey across Canada. I don't know if you've spent any time in there, but it's really really interesting approach. And then the outside, as I've described it to everyone who've taken around, is quite scenic. It's quite dramatic. It's not really striving to be like a conventional type of building. It's like a giant piece of scenery with all sorts of angular shapes, which are actually replicating an iceberg. But again, it's interesting for a different reason. And I think a great pavilion.
It's a really thoughtful project, the Canadian Pavilion. From kind of Laurie, the Commissioner General, leading that. We also had a female-led team from the Japan side who worked on that pavilion for us, which a Japanese bilingual team, but which is quite unusual in Japanese construction to have a female-led team. And that was kind of created its own energy, and it's a very diverse and inclusive pavilion as well. And the way we work in terms of sustainability and the reuse of our equipment was kind of really, the Canadians really sat up and thought about that. And with the architects, Ray-Side Brasier and Guillaume Payetier, they were kind of really into that. And it was a really kind of great collaboration with JKFL as well. So the Canadian team who came together with ours when we were bidding on the project, everyone felt we could really deliver Canada something really appropriate for what they wanted to do, which is an important Pacific partner for them, Japan as well. And that was working with quite an experienced expo team on the client side as well.
And again, with the terms of our core product and stuff, it's all constructed from the back of house as entirely the modular system, same modular system as used on the UK pavilion, and everything front of house is built off the truss systems, configured in different ways with angular connections and so on, but fundamentally based on kit, but used in a completely different fashion.
Yeah, and the Canadian Pavilion obviously had different volumes, and like you said, it was all set up to be. And when you saw it from the ground, from the top, you can actually see the form, and the floor is painted blue, so you can feel the icebergs floating on this body of the water. And then you walk into this dark space, and you're handed this iPad and briefed on how to explore the icebergs. And I've visited my fair share of Canada, and I could actually identify the places. Oh, that's Niagara Falls, that's Quebec, that's but for example, like if majority of the visitors were Japanese, if they'd never been to Canada, it's a nice way to virtually experience the beauty of the country. Very simple compared to the other four. The Canadian content was the simplest out of the four.
But also strikingly different in terms of, there's lots of similarities between lots of the different exhibitions in terms of the technology being used and that type of thing, even if the content's very different, but they were radically different to everyone else. I don't think there's anything on the site like that. And, I thought that was, a great point.
Yeah. And it's also because what I also found was, the US, the UK one, you go room by room and you're actually guided by the team, by the staff, and you have to watch this video for 3 minutes and then you have to move on and you're shuffled to other. You don't have any element of engagement. You're not touching anything. You're not feeling anything. Whereas in Canada, they weren't pushing you. You could take your time. You could move around. You could spend, and they would show you around. They would talk to you, and if they saw you struggling with the machine, and especially the one with the space people, and that was complicated to get the last room to see them floating. And I felt that was definitely a win for them compared to the more controlled visitor experience of US and UK.
Yeah, no, I thought it's very brave as an approach. I mean, given the context of what it is, and no, I thought it was very, 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 good, solid, very solid.
All right, now let's move across the world to Australia. Let's talk about Australia.
Well, again, completely different.
Yeah.
And very much. I mean, from the client side of things, they were very, very, very clear about how they use the space, and obviously there's the public bit, but actually the back of house part of it is actually quite a lot bigger than the front of house part. And they have they know exactly what they want to use it for entertaining, hospitality, all that sort of stuff. And so very, very clear brief from the client. The front of house bits, like with the overhanging canopy at the front and the screen, was meant to be inviting and to get people to want to come into it and then go into the exhibition. I think it was very successful, and I think there was some fantastic bits in the exhibition. Again, some creative approaches, with the, some theatrical effects, like with the mirrors behind the trees and the projection, all that sort of stuff. Really, really good. And then from a ES point of view, from a product point of view, is the whole building was based on ES product, clearer span product that we'd use on bigger arenas and so on. And in fact, even with its own sustainability story, I mean, even some of the special elements were bits that were repurposed, that we'd designed and manufactured on Tokyo for the shooting range. And again, that was important. And the other bit that I really liked was that although parts of the interior of the pavilion were really high finish and, really good, high quality architectural aesthetic and also well finished, but they very deliberately included, so you had sight of the ES truss and so on, so that everyone could understand that it was a building that had another purpose as well. And I thought that worked really, the juxtaposition worked really, really well.
They were really enlightened as a client team. And when we started working, they'd already done their design competition with Nick and Seke and Buchan Architects, so a Japanese-Australian design team that had been done. It was, some of them were design and build competitions, some of them were responding to the design. So we already had the architects, and then we worked with them to say, well, actually, if we could use these legacy parts from London 2012 as well as Tokyo 2020, we could create an incredibly sustainable pavilion, and everyone really bought into that. Particularly the Australian government, DFAT, the Department for Trade. So that was a really satisfying journey as we worked out how our components could achieve that architectural vision. But we took the sustainability kind of even further. By the exhibition, we actually built that in Australia so that the Australian stakeholders could approve it and visit it and experience in Australia before it got shipped to Japan, and some of that will go back as well. So we, rather than kind of winging it and putting it in place, they actually did it really thoughtfully, and we used our Australian supply chain. It's really important to our clients that we are using both Japanese supply chain, but also architects or local suppliers from their countries, because they're showcasing the best. But that comes really naturally for us. We have supply chains in all of these countries where we built pavilions as well. So that was an exciting bit of the collaboration for us to bring together. So yeah, the Australian one's been really good. And like Olly says, they do a lot of trade, they do a lot of deals. It's a very commercial space for them, as well as an educational and hospitality space. So understanding that from the outside outset was really helpful. And it's a really good one, I think.
And again, as a visitor, the Australian Pavilion, as you said, had that stage. And the day we visited, there were Aboriginal band performing and inviting the audience to come and dance with them. And so, again, that was something I thought was missing from the other three. But like you said, they're all different. All of them had different, offer different visitor experience. And for me personally, I found the Australian one really beautiful from a storytelling perspective. Again, what are the lessons our Aboriginal ancestors have taught us, and those little motifs and the cultural icons through the animals, and you seeing the koala, in the forest, and it's actually inviting you to how many animals can you spot, or what's the constellation. So and the final video of the Great Barrier Reef, so beautiful. very, very beautiful.
Yeah, did you notice when you walked in, the first thing you see is this sort of video screen, which is a map of Australia.
Yes.
I mean, I thought that was incredible. So
Yeah.
showing it from different aspects, like the rivers and how they pan out across Aboriginal groupings across the country, the whole dicing it in different ways. I thought that was really, really, it's genuinely interesting.
Yeah.
To look
That's
at.
when we get to learn a lot, don't we?
Exactly.
Yeah, no,
cynics like us.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked about all 4 pavilions. Do you have a favorite pavilion?
Genuinely not being political at all. There were different, and I would say this because obviously taken quite a few people round all of the pavilions at different times, and there's different aspects of each of the pavilions that I really like, so that I wouldn't say there's a favourite per se. There's favourite bits of each of them. I like, like Canada, I would go as the favourite exhibition. America, I would say, as the favourite sort of iconic architecture. Australia, I would say, for being probably the most welcoming. For the UK, for being the most genuinely and sincere sustainability story. So each of them have got good, different dimensions. So good.
Yeah, I mean, you'll have to ask me that in a month's time because I'm going in the middle of September.
Okay, all right.
I'm going to spend some time in all 4 of the pavilions.
Yeah.
There.
Okay.
So I've been seeing lots of video and seeing. I was out there when we were bidding.
Yeah.
On the project.
Yeah.
So I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Now similarly political.
Yeah, I mean, even more political.
That generally wasn't bullshit. I mean, I genuinely mean that. There was different dimensions.
And the landscaping of the UK one, from what I've seen, and the location is really exciting as well because you've got the gardens and you've got the water in front as well. And it's been very hot this summer.
Yeah.
I think it probably depends what time of the day you're going and kind of how you're feeling.
The UK location was great because it was on the water, because that's also where you watch the drone show and the water fountain show. So it was strategic. I don't know how countries go about bidding for plots or buying for plots, but that was a very strategic location. There's no way you would miss the UK pavilion based on that strategic location.
Yeah, exactly. No, and like similarly, the American one, obviously positioned it very close to the evidence.
Yeah.
So because they were to have a certain amount of people.
Yeah.
Etc.
The visibility. Yeah.
So but they think about that stuff very deeply before committing.
Yeah. So from my perspective, again, as a visitor, I very much enjoyed the Japan pavilion, and obviously the host nation. Obviously, even Dubai Expo, the host nation, there's huge responsibility. They put on a really good show. But I think what I most enjoyed about that pavilion was this element of visitor engagement throughout, and a continuous story. But they were talking about algae, how algae is the future, and what technology and what they're doing with algae and how it's informing some of their future thinking. And as a visitor, you go through this structure, which is again built entirely in timber with no joints. They're a typical Japanese structure. And then elements of Japanese culture weaving in. So Hello Kitty, Doraemon, and, those kind of things. So, and nobody pressurizes you. Like, you can keep moving, you can stay in for as long as you like, or as long as you don't. And there were places to sit. And there was one, place where the 3D printer was building the seats in front of you. So you just sat there watching this machine build these seats. Mesmerizing.
I mean, we get from our Japanese office, they issue the visitor numbers.
Yeah, and you see it it changes. Yeah, as a visitor, you see it too. Yeah,
it's phenomenal. I mean, I think the ultimate capacity per day is 150,000 people. And I mean, they're not far off that every single day of the week.
Yeah.
Every single day of the week. School days, holidays, bank holidays. It's incredible.
I think if I saw the counter and I was leaving, because I would site right at the end, I think my day was 130,000. And I was like, wow. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. That sheer volume of people that traverse the site.
Every single day.
All right. Let's move on now to, the innovation and legacy piece, and we've already touched upon it, but let's say there's someone out there who's hearing about reusable, demountable and relocatable architecture for the first time. How would you explain this concept of reusable architecture to them?
For us, it's about a building system that can be reconfigured to create another space. So how do you create a structure? How do you design and fabricate a structure which will do its job in situ for a 6-week Olympic and Paralympic run, or 5-10 years in location, but also there will be value in that asset. So where it's worked really well, it's worked really well for us with rock concert stages for years and years. They come in and out of stadiums. We have to get them onto trucks. They have to come through the tunnel. They have to be craned up. The motors have to lift the roofs. Those have to do those years. That's an asset that we look after. We fabricate really carefully. Those are our systems, and we move them all around the world, and they have to work season after season after season. And obviously we replace, but we can build more of that system. But that we have applied that to other building systems. But what it also means is you can look at it from a different way, because buildings are, someone has to pay for them. They have to work. They have to have a content and a purpose. One of the buildings we've done recently is the ABBA Voyage arena near here. So that's our bit of, perhaps one of our favourite bits of the world, East London, where we are now. Another bit of the old Olympic Park legacy, Pudding Mill Lane. But we designed and fabricated that with Stewfish the architects as lead contractor to be relocated. But if you've been to ABBA Voyage, you'll know that you're working once you walk into the theatre space, it's like a permanent, very, very high quality theatre space. Doesn't feel temporary at all. That's because it's fully relocatable, but it also means it can work for as long as the client, ABBA, want it to work for that show, and as long as the local authority wants to give permission for that piece of land to use. So they've invested in an asset, and that's quite a good way of explaining how we work. Whoever, whether it's us with our stages and we're renting those to a client, or whether it's a client who's buying a building from us, they've invested in that asset, which then can have a future life, can continue on site because it's working to a permanent building requirement, but also could be relocated. So for a meanwhile use project like ABBA, particularly in urban locations, it can work really, really well.
Fascinating. And I think one thing in my conversation with Tomoko on the ground, that she explained to me how essentially the countries who are commissioning you are renting these systems from you. And I found that fascinating, that was the case. And in my head, I thought, you constructed, you move on, and then it's someone else's responsibility. But you take full ownership of
the legacy cost. Isn't there? There's a legacy cost to the client of operating, or with an expo or an Olympics, of making that land or that site good at the end. And part of their contract with the organising committee is to leave no trace.
Yeah. I thought we were going to open that up slightly in terms of, so you take a site like the Olympic Park, and it was being, the Olympics were in 2012, and the point of the Olympics, obviously the Olympic Games, but it was used as a vehicle to regenerate the whole area. And there's a catalyst for that. And as a part of that, obviously there was a plan, game times plan, and some of the buildings were deemed to be buildings that were going to be permanent, like the Copper Box, the main stadium, etc. But there was a whole chunk of it, including some of the things that we did, which were designed to be removed afterwards, and so that's where what we're doing could really fit into the sustainability piece on a much bigger level, because we're contributing in a way that then allows other things to happen. I mean, it would hardly be sustainable to whack up a permanent water polo venue on the Olympic Park and then dismantle it afterwards. That would be crazy. I mean, so it's designed around components that are out of our inventory to, create a bespoke looking architect's vision, but it is based on proprietary equipment, which then goes back into stock and then on to other projects afterwards. And I think that's where we're really supporting the general move towards sustainability and so on.
And the circular economy.
Yeah, I was going to say circular design principles.
It's absolutely what we do. And in fact, the water polo venue, which would it have been a non-sustainable way to build it, but also to have kept that operating, that pavilion long term, when you don't have it's not a big sport for ours. They're expensive buildings to heat and cool. we were able to take that back into our inventory, and a large amount of that equipment actually became a permanent velodrome that we built in Jakarta in Indonesia. And that was for the Asian Games in 2018. And we used that truss system to build the structure and the roof for what is now a permanent velodrome. Because as we started that project with the Indonesian authorities and the organising committee, when they realised the investment they were going to make into a temporary velodrome, which has a special wood track for the competition, they actually said, well, actually, why don't we haven't got one in this region of Asia? Why don't we build a permanent one? And we were able to do that with them. So increasingly, we're building modular permanent venues as well. So we can be both in a relocatable way, but also perhaps if you've got a fast track requirement where you particularly needed a design and build venue, that's when we would use our proprietary systems to build something also permanently. Or this kind of grey land of a bit like ABBA, let's see how commercially successful this venue is.
Yeah.
So that we can keep extending it. We can, charge a good ticket price. We can perhaps build it in a modular way which can be extended and have that flex within the venue. So you're almost designing already for that retrofit in the future.
Yeah, that is so fascinating. So there are. Now I'm envisioning this warehouse now where all these pieces live. So they're born and then they're assigned a function or a place, and they go to that place, and then they come back. They perform for said function. They come back to the warehouse, have a rest. Yeah, that's where then they rest, recoup, and then they find the next life reincarnated into another space.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, we've got a significantly sized space in the middle in the East Midlands, and that's where that all happens. And equipment comes in, and it goes through before it goes. It doesn't just go in, sit there, and go out again. It goes through a testing process. If a piece of equipment is going to be reused, will be checked by agreed engineering specified process that's applied, and then it will be shot blasted and then repainted, so it goes out looking like a brand new piece of equipment, even though it's possibly done several other projects previously. And that all happens
but we will often have client for a big project like an Olympics, say the Paris Olympics. We did a lot of work there. We had the Paris team come to our yard in the East Midlands to actually see whether we had all this equipment we were talking about. We were able to show these big truss systems, flat packed in big racks. So actually, this was the venue from London 2012 or the venue from Tokyo, and they could actually see that what we were talking about and what we designed for them through our AutoCAD systems with the architects actually did already exist and was genuinely going to be a circular solution to what they were doing. So, we can actually walk around. They look like bits of truss, but we can say what it was and what it was. It's quite fun.
So is there any limitation on from a design perspective, from a creative perspective? Would you be able to build any architect's vision with your system?
you're going examples. Probably the most bespoke project that we've ever did was a project with Zaha Hadid and Karl Lagerfeld for Chanel. We got a number of years ago, and literally the shape was completely irregular. Every individual piece of paneling was bespoke, and so on and so on. But even on that, we managed to use all the flooring was our own proprietary modular flooring system. The design approach was all about actually being able to build it on the ground, lift it up in one go, even though it was bespoke. So we're applying principles learnt from staging and so on over the years, and applying that. And little details, just as an example, behind there's a liner within there. It was a beautiful thing. I don't know if you've seen a picture.
Tomoko did show me. Yeah, she did.
Fantastic. Yeah. One of the details that I always like is my favourite detail in a way is that the lights were designed so that they were magnetic. So in order to install them, all you had to do was touch the metal structure and they were located, and then plug them in. And it's things like that which were designed for speed. And so I think, if you're in terms of the limitation, absolutely not. And that was designed as a relocatable structure. It was moved 3 times, and you really couldn't be any more bespoke than that. I would say.
Yeah, I guess I think Zaha Hadid Architects, that's the benchmark for If you can build something that they designed, I guess. We've touched upon this a lot about, culture and legacy. We've talked about the ABBA Voyage, London 2012, but just bringing it home to, if you were to pick an example from one of your past projects where, this relocatable structure has gone on to have an extended long-term impact on a place or a community, what would it be?
I mean, I think I'd probably pick the velodrome in Jakarta, because it's also used as a community space. And I mean, one of the things we haven't talked about is the complex nature of the mechanical engineering and the cooling and air conditioning involved in a lot of our venues. We do a lot of activation in summer, but we build in Japan, we build in the US and Australia, and you have to make those buildings work efficiently for air cooling. And we had to do that with Jakarta, and you have to keep the wooden track for the cycling at a temperature so that it doesn't spoil as well, and they can keep hosting events. But I talked about a bit in Paris last summer with some stakeholders, and I got sent some photos of them having big community art events and creative workshops within the middle of the velodrome. So they're just using it in the city, and it sits there. And actually, we did a new branding video, and we're like, oh, it'd be great to have some video of Jakarta Velodrome. Oh, we don't have any. And then we found a Canadian cyclist who was using it to qualify for the Paris Olympics, and we paid him a bit of money, which helped support his Olympic bid, to get his footage to put in our video. And you kind of, well, we built that for 2018, and this is 2023, 24, and it's having a life, and it means they can bid on future events, and they can host. So they've been able to host regional cycling competitions in Indonesia. And you go, actually, that was our modular construction. They could have ended up with a very temporary substandard that might have got across the line type venue, but actually it wouldn't have been a legacy for the city, and that continues to be a legacy, and they continue to make it work there. So that's one of the ones, I think, and it's really beautiful inside, even without any cycling. What about you, Ollie? Which projects?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many projects that are favourite projects, but I suppose that ones that's still in city, I think probably is ABBA. I mean, just because it's got such a great profile, it's drawing people into that end of the Olympic Park, which is, there's been all sorts of studies done telling you how much cash it's bringing into the But it's great to have been part of something that's a fantastic success story, and getting that footfall every day. It's a great atmosphere down there. So for me, I think that's probably the current favourite project. But and also as well, it's got bits in it again. And keep going on about this, but going back to our staging routes, the way that it's actually built, the way that it was erected was exactly like you build a stage. We put the towers up, the roof was built on the ground level with all the cladding, acoustic treatment, lots of services put in, the steel grid, all at ground level. And then as one big 750-ton load, it was moved in 4 hours up to height. And, again, that's just the approach that how we would start with a stage. Build it at low level. It's cheap, it's quicker to do, it's more cost effective. You're less prone to delays because of weather, because you're not using cranes up at high level and all that sort of stuff. It's much safer. And it's also, truly sustainable, because it allows you then to take it down again and put it up somewhere else in the same way.
It's a really thoughtful venue in its place. I'm always staggered by the ease of access and egress, with the train station, the DLR coming right next to it. So you think, oh my God, all these people leaving at the same time, and they just disperse. And it's just brilliant. So you can get in and out of there, even though you've gone to quite a far bit of East London. And then also it's great. You can see it from the train. I love that. But also that, the acoustically, and this is what LLDC and now NUMA, the planning authority, really love, is that there's no acoustic bleed. So all the residential properties nearby, you can get a really great experience as a member of the audience inside. You're getting a really loud show, but actually outside you wouldn't hear a thing. You can't hear it. So I think that gives everybody confidence to kind of think about how could you do something similar in different cities and different towns.
Yeah. So I attended South by Southwest here in London, and Bjorn Ulvaeus, I attended his talk, and he said, "Oh, it was a bit weird sitting in there watching my younger self, but then I got used to it." And then, and he was like, it's just amazing to see these new audiences now having a chance to experience that. Like, I didn't get a chance to see ABBA, and I grew up, my mum was a big fan, so that's how I'm familiar of the music. But this is a chance to engage with newer audiences, people who I didn't get a chance to watch them live. I think the concept is...
particularly wouldn't go to a really chaotic stadium show. Not that really got a big stadium show. You get a slightly different... You get that demographic and another demographic who feel like they're getting almost a little mini festival experience.
Yes.
Quite a curated space because it's fully immersive, but there's a dance floor and you can do your thing and bop around. People go 4, 5, 6... Yeah. 6 times.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the success, because obviously there's so much experiential stuff around at the moment, I think one of the massive reasons why ABBA is actually successful is because the band themselves were very much involved in what the actual content was. And they've got a whole, in various bits, they've got this sort of self-depreciating type of approach to it, which actually comes across really well and gets the audience on side. And I think that kind of differentiates it from lots of other of the shows we do, where it's more driven by people who are, doing it basically for commercial reasons, etc.
Yeah.
They clearly care about what their product is and how they're portrayed very much, and I think that's it really has contributed to the success. It's got if you're going into bullshit speak, the content has some sort of integrity about it, as opposed to just being about the dollar or whatever.
And that was the great thing when ABBA came out of the pandemic as well, the ABBA Voyage Theatre, and when London takes something new on and it does it right, it does it brilliantly. And you've kind of got the O2 and you've seen the success of Co-op Live in Manchester, so kind of I'm interested to see what the next kind of new big thing.
As am I.
We shouldn't be just copying something else that's been done. I mean, we should be innovating and developing our own stuff. I mean, London is one of the centres of design in the universe, and we should be coming up with new ideas, not necessarily following what other people do, which may not be politically correct.
I think for me, definitely having as someone who has visited many cities, and I think London still has the best cultural offer as a global city. Maybe New York, it could rival it to a certain degree, but exactly what you said, London does culture phenomenally well.
Transport, and it's the transport which really helps as well. That makes a real difference.
So, what's currently exciting you in the world of reusable structures right now? Where do you think the world is heading?
I think the meanwhile use piece is really interesting. So, cities are evolving. Real estate is a complex commercial kind of ecosystem of its own. So, a site might have an immediate use, but might be part of a phased residential development over 10, 20 years. Actually, how do you create these assets which can activate those sites and then be relocated? And I think we're just getting to much more intelligent conversations with advisors, consultants, local authorities, and developers. And we're seeing much more interest in developers saying, actually, I do want a different type of venue. And actually, I do want a phased development. And I think that's how I'm going to raise my capital against for a long-term development. So we're excited to see more sustainable venues built, less white elephants. You don't have to build everything. You don't have to build a concrete entertainment concert hall now, which might not be appropriate in 15 years. What are you going to build that's going to have great shows, that's going to work for the promoters, going to work for the acts? But actually, the real value could be in that land kind of in 15 years' time when they're ready to do the next phase of residential. So helping cities and places evolve, being part of, we're a contractor, but we can run alongside bigger developers and contractors who are developing longer term projects because there's space for us within that ecosystem. So that type of different changing market appeals for us. We know how to respond to an Olympics. We know how to put a rock concert stage up. That's kind of almost bread and butter work for us. But actually we see kind of us as an alternative design and build contractor, kind of increasingly providing really high quality venues in particular. You know, it's about the people who go to live events. It's about getting people off their phones.
Yes.
Real things, whether it's sport or entertainment or music. Our business doesn't exist without those events. And actually, I don't think any of us would say we're seeing less people wanting to go to live events. That's just growing. That's what people are choosing to spend their money on. So we need to give them a really good, safe, kind of amazing experience. And we don't create that content. We create the structures and backdrop that
The shell,
and you know, can use. So yeah, we see that growing and growing.
Yeah, the future is experiential for sure. I mean, that's what the whole conversations I have around where's the high street going, how's the high street evolving. The future is experiential. People expect to demand it. You know, you go into a shopping mall, it's not just, oh, I walk into a shop, I want to feel something. I'm not just going to buy, I want to feel something. I want to film something from my TikTok or my Instagram, or, you know, you have to give people those experiential moments. But I wonder, but do you think that your global modular system, do you think it has applications in more mainstream, like outside of expos, sport and leisure?
Yeah, I mean, it's a funny thing because it was actually originally conceived as during COVID. We delivered a bunch of surge hospitals. I think we delivered 9 in total. For the NHS.
Oh, the Nightingale hospitals. Yeah.
We did 8 surge hubs.
Okay.
On behalf of the NHS. And I think that the idea was born out of how to spend government money kind of more intelligently and with a longer term view in mind. And because of that, that's what was started as of. So the product that we're actually using started off as being designed for a modular hospital. And then was, you know, adjusted to suit the expo scenario, but that doesn't mean that it still couldn't be used as a modular hospital or all sorts of other, similar types of buildings, you know, structures.
Well, temporary housing, temporary accommodation. You know, we have a huge temporary accommodation crisis in this country.
Yeah, I mean, I think specifically on the product because it's big, clear span, so it's going to be used for more, it'll be big in terms of the domestic scale, and also big ceiling heights and things like that. But there's no reason why we couldn't, apply, our thinking to that. I mean, absolutely.
That's interesting. And so what's next for the business? What's next for ES Global after the Osaka Expo? Are we eyeing the 2030 Expo? Is there something you can share right now?
I mean, most definitely. I mean, our major target, clearly, Expo 2030, LA Olympic Games. We've expanded a lot in terms of staging over the last few years. We want to continue that growth, and in line with the increase in stadia-sized shows, etc., which is the trend at the moment.
Yeah.
Chunks of stuff that we're currently bidding on in different Australia, Japan, the UK, etc. So all over the place, there's stuff going on, and lots of things to do, for sure.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It's been a really good conversation. I have so many more questions, but I'll park it right here because my mind is really buzzing. So that ends the more formal part of our conversation. So now we're moving into the final fun segment. It's called the Know Your Neighborhood quiz, but because this is an expo special, I've taken the editorial liberty to choose your neighborhood in this instance. And let's talk about the expo site as a neighborhood, because it is a neighborhood, 130,000 people, visitors alone, then not to mention people on site, and all the pavilions and all the global representatives. It's a mini town, in itself. So, the way it works is I will state 3 facts, and all you have to do is tell me whether you think they're true or false.
We're working on this together, Olly.
Yeah, it's a team sport. And why you think they may be true or why you may think they may be false. All right, are we ready?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, go. So, my first fact is the expo site on Yumeshima Island in Osaka Bay will vanish once the expo ends, leaving no permanent trace.
When you say no permanent trace, you mean the actual the land will still exist, but all the pavilions will be gone. All the pavilions and the ring will all be gone, and there is plans to build other things like they were talking about a casino.
True or false? Yes.
So, well, if that answers, so
True.
So it's true. Yeah. Not that the land won't disappear.
The land won't disappear. They built the land. Yeah.
Everything on it, apart from the tube station, obviously.
Okay. All right. I'll give you that one because it's true. The pavilions are temporary, but they have plans to redevelop into a smart city, and it's going to have a hospitality element and an integrated resort. But it was fascinating how they built that station, I think, just for the expo. And I think a similar case in Dubai as well. They built the monorail so that people could get to the expo place. So, you have to build the infrastructure first. Otherwise, why would people go? Okay, very good. 1 out of 3. Fact number 2, the Grand Ring's timber structure is made exclusively from Japanese sourced wood.
True, I'm going to say.
Oh, I was going to say false.
Well, pick one.
I think it's true. I think it's true.
That is false. The Grand Ring uses roughly 70% Japanese cedar and cypress, with the remainder being imported Scots pine. And this ring is designed by Sue Fujimoto, for those who don't know, and it is the largest timber structure in the world, as certified by Guinness World Records. So it'll be a shame to see it go, I guess.
Yeah, I would say so, definitely.
But obviously those pieces of timber will find, new life and purpose elsewhere. So we've got 1 out of 3 on the scoreboard. Final fact. Osaka hosted a World Expo back in 1970. And in that expo, the world was first introduced to the IMAX screen.
Possible. I'd go for a yes.
Yeah, let's say true.
That is correct, yes. So IMAX made its global debut at Expo 70, and the futuristic ideas from that expo still influence Japan's urban design even today. And it was the most visited expo until Expo 2010, so almost 40 years. It had 64 million visitors, and Expo 2010 saw over 73 million. Yeah, Shanghai. So we'll see what number Osaka 2025 clocks, but yeah. So that was great. 2 out of 3, not bad, which just sadly means that our time for the moment has come to an end. I've had a great time learning about the world of reusable, relocatable, demountable architecture. Maybe we need to find one word.
No, it's good.
For it. I'm certainly a novice. I've learned a lot through this conversation and talking in my conversation to Moko as well. And I do hope that it grows in momentum. More people come on board, and we can use these kits and these products that you've developed to create these places that may be temporary in nature, but like I said, have long-lasting cultural impact. So they are very much, I think, an important toolkit in our placemaking and place shaping agenda.
Definitely, thank you. Great.
Well, thank you so much, Olly, Amy. It has been a great pleasure talking place with you. Thank you for sharing this conversation with me.
Thanks very much. Really
Thank
enjoyed
you.
it.
And we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to join the conversation on social media with the hashtag #TalkingPlace. I would also love for you to leave our podcast a review and subscribe to all our podcasts and YouTube channels so you don't miss an episode. There's so much more to explore when it comes to creating good places, and I'm excited to do a deep dive into other topics with you in our next episode. I'm Tanisha Raffiuddin, and it's been my pleasure to be your podcast host. Thank you for listening. See you again next time, where we'll continue talking place. Talk soon.